capitalism and democracy are implacable foes. They can give no quarter. These are two utterly distinct theories of human worth. One which says you are what you own and control, preferably the means of production, and another which says all human beings have equal weight in the political process and by implication in some metaphysical scheme of values. Well, now these two systems are nakedly exposed in their opposition to each other. It seems to me, and it sort of comes out of what Ralph talked about this morning, that in trying to get a general overview of what these bifurcations are that loom in the future, they have to do with choice on many, many levels. I mean, obviously what's up for a lot of people is reproductive choice. But there are also, a lot of people in the world don't like being where they are. They would rather migrate somewhere else. So choice of travel, choice of location, reproductive choice, job choice, all of these things are values either to be preserved or to be consciously suppressed. The global society is now an integrated unit in the sense that the data that it generates flows into central modeling institutions that then give a picture of it back. But to date, we have not confronted the implications of this in terms of planning. We have been essentially passively contemplating the buildup of an explosive situation very fatalistically. And now we, at least I think, should contemplate the possibility of intervening in our situation. You know, I hear all kinds of fatalism. I hear people saying that our two main problems are population and epidemically transmitted social diseases, and that therefore no problem, you see. But I find that a fairly horrifying way to manage human affairs, simply by an appeal to nature to cut us down, to send the grim reaper among us because we can't manage our own destinies. It seems to me that a whole rethinking of the notion of freedom has to come, and that it isn't strictly a matter of more freedom. One of the things that I think the 20th century has secured but is reluctant to face is the toxic power of imagery. That this is the century of the perfection on a scale previously undreamed of propaganda. And propaganda has to do with the toxicity of images. Now here at a place like Esalen, we give lip service to the idea that images can heal, but it also means they can hurt. And there are far more hurtful images around than healing images. Now, a social polity coming out of John Locke and the English social philosophers would want to stay away from that in the John Stuart Mill tradition. But I think we're going to have to go back to Plato. Plato did not trust the poets. And the heirs of the poets in our hell bardo are Madison Avenue, because images are being manipulated to the point where democratic institutions become a joke because they are simply referendums of, or rather exhibitions of conditioned behavior, which was not the notion in the first place. I'm trying to stay away from the obvious things on the political agenda: reconstruction of the environment, advancement of women to positions of power, promotion of multiculturalism, this sort of thing, because these are, to my mind, basically cliches. Not that I don't agree with them, but they're not particularly interesting. The interesting ideas have to do with touching the taboos. As we approach the millennium, it's going to become increasingly important to, if not control, certainly regulate and monitor the irrational element among us, which is a curious concept because largely we are the irrational element. However, we're not nearly as irrational as you might wish to be assured. Just listen to what's on AM radio on Sunday morning and you'll discover that you ain't irrational. You represent an extremely high slice of rationality compared to the foment that builds in those that follow what we euphemistically call the way of cheeses. And this is going to pose social problems as we manage our way through the millennium. It did at the last millennium. I mean, for the 3 years centered around 999, people simply stood slack-jawed in the streets of Europe with their eyes fixed on the sky. No work got done. Well, the consequences then were trivial. Now it's not so clear. I mean, what we're really caught in is a clash of values that's getting an unhealthy, where the traditionalist side is getting an unhealthy handicap because of calendrical coincidence. You know, just being born or living through the close of the second millennium poses all kinds of problems for societies that are trying to preserve humanist social values. If the Renaissance had begun in 985, I dare say it would have failed. Let's see, anything else? I guess I should just sum it up. The concept which lies behind this is the idea of guiding images. Eric Jansch, who I think we all related to, used to talk about this, that a society has to be given guiding images. McLuhan said the 20th century has navigated the way you drive a car using a rear view mirror. In other words, almost entirely without guiding images. It's the disgrace of 20th century social philosophy that the only two innovative social ideas the 20th century can claim as its own are Freudian psychoanalysis, which was put out of business last week by Woody Allen, and fascism. These are the two authentic ideological contributions of the 20th century. Socialism is a 19th century idea, fully worked out in the 19th century. So I think that, I'm basically an optimist, but not because I have faith in human institutions, but because I think there is a transcendental attractor that will eventually pull our chestnuts out of the fire. But in the time which lies between then and now, and in the spirit of covering one's bets, I think it's worthwhile talking about how society should seriously be reconstructed to make it a more livable place. I think the recent election in England and the election we're enduring here prove that we cannot expect to hear any kind of meaningful reformist rhetoric from politicians and have there be any hope of it actually being winning at the polls. So then it behooves dissidents like ourselves to try and offer something other than UFO rescue or utter despair as the two poles of the political dialogue.